Hello, and welcome to Let's Meet the Virologists, a podcast about the people behind today's virology headlines, people working to understand viruses and how they affect you. With the annual American Society for Virology meeting coming up soon, we are talking with students, postdocs, and other virologists presenting at the meeting so that you can learn who they are and what they do. I am Larissa Thackeray, and I am hosting this podcast from America's Heartland in St. Louis, Missouri. On June 21st, 2023, we talked with Pedro Jiménez, an assistant professor in the Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile. He received his veterinary degree from the University of Chile and his PhD in comparative biomedical sciences at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. His lab studies the ecology of avian influenza in Chile and South America.
So thanks for talking with us today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So, well, my name is Pedro Jiménez. I'm a veterinarian graduated at the University of Chile. I live in Chile currently. I'm traveling to ASV. I traveled last year as well. So I try to keep in touch with the American Society of Virology. I'm also a member there as well. And well, I've been basically interested in virology since for a couple of years now. Since basically I started working, my first encounter with viruses was basically when I started working in the salmon industry in Chile back in 2007. And we had this massive outbreak of ISA virus, which is also a orthomyxovirus as well. And then I was really interested in pursuing a PhD and doing more work. I was doing basically mostly sampling at that time, but I got to work with some people from the University of Bergen that were doing research in ISA virus there. So I was really interested in continuing my graduate studies there. So I basically traveled to the US and tried some luck, actually. I arrived there in the midst of the crisis of 2009. But I managed to get a work, and I started actually in St. Louis at the St. Louis Zoo as a research intern, and then I started working at Washington University St. Louis, very low. Basically, I started as a cage washer, and then I moved up to an animal caretaker, and then I ended up being a veterinary technician actually, and I worked there for a couple of years, like 2 years. Doing that work, and because I wanted to get more experience, because I hadn't had too much research experience until then. So I had that experience in the south of Chile, but I wanted to get close to a university. So I thought that was a good way to get to work with labs and etc. So I worked in all kinds of stuff like derivation of embryos, and I was in charge of mouse colonies, and I worked actually with the diamond lab too for a couple of times. I scribbled like diamonds on their cages and stuff like that, sent them over, and then so I started my PhD in in Wisconsin, in Madison. And I was very lucky because I got to travel a lot back to Chile actually doing my PhD. I did avian influenza surveillance in Chile and Colombia. So that was something really new because really South America was a black box by then. Nobody really knew what was going on in influenza viruses in South America at all. It was the least represented continent in avian influenza sequences in GenBank. There were more sequences of Antarctica that were actually at that point in South America. So when I got to start here, everybody was like, hey, we are influenza free. There's no influenza, nobody knows anything. So and that didn't make much sense because the flu travels with wild birds, and wild birds don't really know anything about borders or whatnot. So the first time I went to Chile to sample and to Colombia, I obviously found lots of viruses, all kinds. And I even got some outbreaks in a live animal market in Colombia, and I got real good diversity of viruses in Chile. And so I continued doing that throughout my PhD, and then I went to by then Stacy Schultz-Cherry, she was in my research committee, also with Andrew Mealy, and in my PhD committee, and Stacy offered me a position over at as a postdoc in St. Jude's Children's Hospital. So I went there in the Department of Infectious Diseases, and we did some really cool work. I continued the sampling in South America, and also I participated a bit in some other cool studies that we're doing with human cohorts. So when I returned to Chile back in late 2017, I started to try to work my way here, like first I had to start as an independent researcher, and then I finally went and start teaching classes as well. So because that's what I like. I like to teach. I like academia. I'm pursuing a tenure track position basically. But it takes time. It's not easy, positions are full. You have to start very low. So that was what I did. So I stayed in the purgatory for like 4 years, and until I reached my way to an assistant professorship at the Universidad Católica, where I'm right now, which is a very, very good university. It's actually ranked as the best university in South America at the moment. And we just formed the new vet school at the university. So I'm teaching the first generation students infectious diseases and introduction to veterinary sciences, all kinds of stuff, and doing my research. So I also have a NIH grant for doing surveillance, which is great. I got a grant from Chile as well to do a shorebird research for avian flu. And now, we have this Pansotia, right? This outbreak of H5 viruses all over the continent, and it has been really challenging because by one side we want to do all this surveillance, but we have to watch out, basically, keep it safe. It's very hard to do research with highly pathogenic viruses at the lab, basically with BSL-2 settings. I mean, we don't have a BSL-3, so we can only do genomic surveillance at the moment. But we're getting there. It's a thing we have to start building laboratory spaces, but it's been a really good challenge to be also being able to do this at the early stage of my career with a lot of support, because in that case I feel lucky because it's actually a discipline that's actually picking up a lot in South America. Infectious diseases, there's really not much known what's going on in the continent. So I'm very happy to be able in this moment, and although it's tragic for all the wildlife that's dying, I hope that the research will help also to be able to manage and mitigate any further outbreaks and gain more knowledge, because if we don't have knowledge of what's going on in nature, basically we always be one step behind of the virus and its mutation. It's such a smart guy, this influenza virus. So
right. So in addition to sort of doing surveillance, are you actually doing molecular virology or other studies in your lab?
So at the moment, we're doing mostly surveillance work. We do molecular epidemiology work. As I said, our lab is still we just got a brand new building. We have to set everything up. I still don't have any we don't have CO2 for cell culture, stuff like that. So it's a thing that has to start. It's a new facility, and the new school. So, but I'm very happy. So for the moment, we're not doing molecular virology, but we're doing everything we can about genomics with the virus. That we can do a lot. Yeah, and we partner basically with St. Jude, and we send them the isolates, and I participated also over there in characterization in vivo and in vitro characterization of isolates and whatnot. So yeah, so that's the thing. We have this partner with through the SEER network that help us with our research.
Right. And I guess looking back, can you tell us when you first became interested in science? So when you were younger, what was your first exposure, or what was the first thing that kind of led you down that path?
Yeah, so before I started vet school, I was between veterinary medicine or biology. So I always had it. Environmental biology actually was a new career that was starting. So I always thought about doing science. And then when I started vet school, of course, there's a lot of clinician work, but I quickly realized that was not my cup of tea, basically. So I was there for a couple of years, like struggling with my studies, because I didn't know how I wanted to go into research or what I wanted to study. And then it was basically when I had a specific class in infectious diseases. It was an advanced class, and that's where I realized, like, one moment I thought, like, this is what I want to do, and this is what I want to do for research. And that's how it played out. And since then, I basically started that same semester. I went to a conference by myself. I was still in school, and that's how I realized that I really wanted to work in infectious diseases and do research in that. I didn't know how, and I didn't even have a clue that would end up in Wisconsin doing that, and in Tennessee for other things. But that's how it played out. So I'm pretty happy. It was a long journey, but it was good.
Great. And then can you sort of let us know, like, what are your plans for, like, medium term, long term? Where do you see the research in your lab going in the next 5-10 years?
For now, we're still trying to address very basic questions of the ecology of influenza in Chile. So I'm also very interested in spatial remote sensing and other areas to determine basically what are the environmental drivers that keep influenza in South America, why we have these massive outbreaks in other host species, the spillovers that are happening here that haven't happened before, basically, in Europe nor in Asia. So this is something very new, and the US is new as well. So there's a lot there to learn. Also, I want to get also more into molecular virology. To be able to answer other questions as well, more specific about the strains that are circulating in South America at the moment or in the future, basically. What are the risk factors? Also, we also have just started a human cohort studies to see what the risk of exposure is for people that actually work with poultry, and what are the zoonotic risks they're basically exposed to. And I think that's where the lab work is going to go in the future.
Okay, great. Well, I think that's it for today. Thanks so much for talking to us, and we look forward to hearing about your research at ASV.
Sunday. Thanks.
This has been Let's Meet the Virologists, a podcast about people who study viruses. This is your host, Larissa Thackeray, and thanks for listening. You can find us on Google, Apple, Amazon Music, and other podcast providers, or at lmtv.podbean.com.